Hey there, good morning or afternoon to everybody, depending on which coast you are on. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to go through continuous feedback for financial organizations. But first, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Casey.
I'm Hilary.
And we're joining you from partly cloudy Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania over here. We hope that your weather is as good, hopefully better than what we're experiencing over here today. I'm the digital marketing manager over at Rhabit. A few little things about me. I am almost always 90% full of Diet Mountain Dew and Doritos. I love some Breaking Bad, but most of all, I love continuous employee feedback.
Yeah, I'm Hilary Wilson. I'm responsible for business development here at Rhabit. I am in a committed love-hate relationship with Peloton instructors. I watch 30 Rock reruns with the fantasy that Tina Fey is my best friend.
Oh, don't we all?
And last but not least, my big thing, core values alignment. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
All she talks about every day, but especially today. And so, quick introduction to Rhabit. If you are new to Rhabit, we are a talent management platform fueled by continuous employee feedback. We think employee feedback is pretty awesome. It can do all of these things and isn't always credited with everything it can be used for. So these are just a quick few snapshots of our platform in action. Feel free, obviously, to let us know of any questions you might have, but let's move right into it. So today's financial services vertical is really challenged, and we picked this topic as the first topic of the year, really, for our webinars, very intentionally. This is not easy. You know, the financial services sector is undergoing all these internal and external pressures for all sorts of reasons, not only because of some of the challenges presented, towards the end of the 2000s, but also, fintech has exploded. Global pressures are rising in several ways, and truly employees across the vertical are pressured, both on the front line, those interacting with clients directly, but also within the companies themselves. And talent leaders are really compelled to address this in two different ways. Number one, they have to make sure that your employees feel supported through all of this transformational change. That front line, they really need to feel that they are supported and heard by the company, but also at the same time, you are challenged to ensure that their behavior aligns with your company values. I think everybody knows that culture is on the tip of everybody's tongue these days for finances. And so that can be a really difficult balance to achieve.
Well, and this is my big buzzword. One of the things that I continue to notice during these big events that happen that alter the course of companies' PR futures is that the senior leaders didn't even know there was disruption in the culture at the lower levels.
Right. And so nobody wants that. Nobody wants that, bomb dropped years later when it could have been prevented, right? So this is where continuous employee feedback can really be used to get you there. Now, if you're joining us on this webinar, we're going to go ahead and assume that you're actively using continuous employee feedback. Maybe you're just trying to figure out a new way to leverage it or how to connect it to other investments that you've made in your HR department recently. So we're just going to make that assumption. I do want to share that towards the end of the deck, which you'll receive a copy of, there are just a few slides on what continuous feedback is, just for those of you who may be kind of new to the topic and want a refresher. But for the rest of us, we're just going to assume that you're already familiar with the topic and just want to learn how to make it work for you. So the first question here would be, how can talent leaders drive behavioral alignment to those company values? And the answer would be, break those company values up into bite-sized, observable behaviors and measure them with your continuous feedback processes. And that can really be done in a few simple steps. One, take that list of core values, assuming that your organization has invested in one, probably invested significant amount of money into building your core value set. Break each one of those values up into observable behaviors. You might have an analyst on your team that can help you do that. You might look to an IO consultant. You might look to your feedback platform. They might have a consulting arm as well. So there are a lot of different resources at your disposal to help you identify, those observable behaviors. Get away from those gut feelings, those discussions, that old legacy model, and start working towards a more data-driven way of finding the behaviors that work for your core values.
Well, it's funny that you say this too. Is one of our internal consultants and I were talking earlier today about the whole big buzzword of analytics. But all analytics is the visualization of these bite-sized pieces.
Yeah,
it's just a really pretty way to be able to tell the story of what's happening in the organization. But it has to start with those data points.
It sounds big, but it can be simple. And so this is one way that our platform, Rhabit, kind of does that for you. So say that one of your core values is helping to embrace change. I think that's pretty relevant value for today's financial services. How that value might be broken up into observable behaviors is over on the right. So here we've broken up that potential, exemplary core value into 5 observable behaviors. What you can then do is use the continuous feedback processes that you have in place. Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, but your employee can receive feedback on how they're performing on those 5 behaviors. In this example, we see that all 5 of them are fairly strong. But in this example, we might have a case where, some of them aren't as strong. But what your employee has then is a blueprint for how to improve. So maybe they're not so great at communication. Maybe they know they're not so great at communication, but they don't know discrete, clear steps that they can take to improve their alignment to that core value. So these 5 here, if that person knows which ones they're strong at, which ones need improvement, they can work on being more clear and easy to understand in their emails or other written documents. They can pay attention to the person in front of them, maybe close their cell phone, close their laptop during meetings, so on and so forth. And so you're able to paint for that employee the precise steps to take. It's like a treasure map to improving everything that will improve their performance and give them a sense of control over their career.
Well, something about this too that we've found to be really interesting is traditional succession planning promotes people based on their quota attainment or their production or some sort of quantifiable thing, and soft skills get left behind. Then people get moved to leadership roles and they may not be as successful. This is a really great way to uncover this. And we do see that within the first couple of months of coming into an organization, leaders' skills may not be as strong as they thought because they didn't have the opportunity to get that honest feedback and reflect. Then over time, 6 months to a year, we start to see noticeable improvement, which, it's really outstanding for us to be able to uncover that for people.
That's right. I think if you give people their own data and they see their own weak points and you give them clear action steps to correct, they take them 9 times out of 10, especially your A players who want to get ahead. So I think in a lot of ways, what many organizations are missing are, number 1, giving the employees their own data, and number 2, giving them clear, direct steps every day that they can take to change their own futures. Yeah. And that leads us into the second question.
Yeah, so how can talent leaders use the feedback to tell the story of the organization's progress and cultural health? So it sounds super complicated, but the fact is when you have the data, it's easy. Just trend your feedback data over time and understand which behaviors you need to target and which still need improvement. So what you're going to find is over time, you'll have this really great story that then you can use for promoting externally, internally, for attracting new talent. And you'll have just this really beautiful progress of how things are going. You'll understand if market conditions are trending people's scores down.
That's
and
right.
People are really starting to feel that. Or for example, if things are favorable and you have new initiatives that are reflecting that, you can, again, adjust and understand as opposed to having to do these major, organizational lifts once a year and hoping that it sticks.
Right. This kind of trended over time data allows you, just like you said, to be more proactive than reactive. So instead of telling that big story at the end of the year, 10 months after everything already happened. You can trend it over time, and immediately it's almost like you've got your own stock prices going up and down, and you can respond in kind. So anytime anybody drops in and says, how are we doing? Are we tracking the goals? Are we ready for that next strategic initiative? You can pull up your performance and say, maybe we weren't 6 months ago, but we are now.
And what a relief will it be when you're in your cohort with internal comms and they ask about, okay, like what can I send out to the organization? You're trying to talk to 50, 60, 70,000 people. You can quickly go into this, understand what that next story is going to be, and push it out in 2 weeks instead of 2 months or sometimes 2 years.
Right. Much more relevant, much more time sensitive. So going back to this idea of giving people their data, what we have here are some snapshots of what continuous feedback might look like for you. Now, of course, these are snapshots from the Rhabit platform. They may be different if you're using other devices, but some ideas that may be helpful is, number one, at the top there, we have an individual performance dashboard. So say that senior leader can see that they're doing great in improvement, they're driving innovation, they're helping others to embrace change, which is certainly important for somebody like a CEO or somebody who's really leading a lot of strategic change in the organization. They're pretty dependable, but they need to improve some of their communication skills. That's how quickly they can identify those 4 things right off the bat. From a manager's standpoint, they can look across their teams and immediately see who's doing well across the board, who needs help and where. And then from an HR admin standpoint, you can see across departments. And this kind of visibility is just unheard of with any other type of feedback system. It's really only continuous that allows you to get this kind of data over time, fresh input, fresh data being put into these feeds, really only attainable with continuous.
Yeah. And I mean, if you are an HR administrator and have access to something and see that something needs immediate intervention, you could potentially circumvent the next big problem.
Right, which, is huge, obviously. So what's the recap here? Continuous feedback can help you map, track, and convey, really activating your competency model. So today we talked about first taking your core values, breaking them up into bite-sized observable behaviors. This again ingrains your core values into your employees, their managers. It helps it become something it's second language. Everybody knows it. Number 2, you can track it over time with continuous employee feedback. So you can see which behaviors are doing well, it's running on all cylinders all the time, and which need improvement, which, kind of sidebar, you can identify maybe your next big learning and development strategy. Which workshop do you need to invest in next? Well, we can see that, going back to that senior leaders dashboard, needs a little bit of help with communication. Maybe there's a leadership workshop on communication. So you can use that feedback to inform all other aspects of your talent management. And then finally, Hilary's favorite, conveying that story.
Love telling a good story.
That's right.
And in the era of corporate social responsibility reports, in the era of the need to advertise your cultural health, Gen Z actually really cares about the values of the organization that they sign offer letters with. So if you're doing on-campus recruitment, how powerful will it be to be able to have in hand, this is what we're doing. You could even share live data and get buy-in from people before they even step in the front door on that first day.
Yeah, it's huge. So what are next steps here? You may be in one of these 3 groups. Potentially, you're still learning about continuous employee feedback, or you're still learning all the ways in which you can leverage it. So kind of like today's topic, where you may already be using continuous employee feedback, but you haven't yet connected it to your core values. So there are a few options for you here. First, please feel free to register for our core value design webinar that's taking place, around this time next month. And then we have a couple of reading resources here that we found really informative. Number one's from an IBM Smarter Workforce Institute playbook, and then People Insight put out a really great resource as well. It's about the UK, so we assume most of our participants here are based in the US, but still absolutely relevant. And that piece of material is just full of all sorts of HR, chief HR executives from all the different kinds of banks over in the UK, talking about how they're making the change, how they're improving culture over at their banks, the challenges that they're undergoing. So it's really, really relevant and helpful.
Yeah, and next, we recommend that you compare Rhabit's features to some of the other continuous feedback platforms.
Right.
Even compared to the one that you're currently using. You may not have something continuous in place, but again, explore and try to understand what the future could look like with this type of data. We also put together a just a quick one-sheeter to assist you with the next steps. And that is something that I do here, is I really help people understand what is going to be most valuable to them.
Mm-hmm.
We really act as partners because Rhabit's not just a software solution, like so many others. We are a white glove consulting and reinforcement tool.
That's right. We're here to be that extra arm for you. And when you receive this recap, a few slides down past this one, there's a little takeaway slide with what to look for. If you haven't considered a continuous feedback platform, what to look for. We know that Fiserv, you've got regulations to consider, you have data security to consider. And so we've listed several questions that our clients have asked us in the past so that you can take those same questions to the different platforms that you're researching. And then finally, if you're ready to do and move forward, shoot us an email. We're happy to set up a little 15-minute introduction, help you get to know Rhabit and get to know us a little better.
Yeah. So looks like we're running short on time, so we're not going to be able to do QA today. How do you feel about that?
Not great, but we understand. So we'll wrap it up here, but thanks so much again for joining us. After this webinar, you'll receive a recap of the PDF version and a few other little tidbits coming your way from Hilary.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.